emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 540.PS10420, certificate number 46468. Gorillas, discovery of.
Now, when you say discovery of the gorillas, I think it's safe to say that
It's one of their better albums. Why are you laughing at that? That's not even funny.
I think it's very funny. I'm just picturing a band called the Gorillas, which now I'm realizing there is a band called the Gorillas.
That's right.
Did they have an album called Discovery? Now I'm realizing that it isn't a joke at all.
It could be their first record. I don't think it is. Gorillas with a Z. They're cartoon characters that also are in a band, like the Banana Splits.
Yes. Now I put it all together. Briefly, I stopped taking my medication, and so all the things you say just seem extra funny.
This is great.
Whee!
If anybody out there is not enjoying Omnibus as much as they used to, please go off your meds. There's no downside.
Here's what happened. I got to the airport, and I was like, got my wallet, got my passport, got my change of socks.
Your passport?
Well, no, I have my new America card.
Do you have a real ID?
Yeah, I have a real ID. I
Nice.
went in and got my real ID. So
Were the lines crazy?
No, it was so funny. Oh, you know what it was? I was getting a new passport.
Oh, okay.
And while I was there, I checked the box for real ID. And so it all came in one package, and I didn't have to deal with any normals.
When I redid my driver's license last year, they were like, you can do this over the mail super easy, but you won't get real ID. And I'm like, oh, they're never going to start enforcing that real ID at airports thing. So I didn't go into the DMV, and now I'm paying the price.
But doesn't your enhanced driver's license qualify?
I don't have I have the old-timey driver's license.
What's the matter
what I'm
with you? I've had an enhanced driver's license for 15 years.
What I'm saying is the last time I tried to renew, they were like, if you want the enhanced one, you'll have to come in. If you want to just get the old one, you can do it in the mail. And I'm like, oh boy, in the mail, that's for me.
Except now, once you get your enhanced one, then you can get it in the mail.
It's true.
So you just have to get over the hump.
At some point, I'm going to have to go into the DMV, but
or carry your passport with you everywhere.
Yeah, I have a little Nexus Global Entry card I can carry.
I have so many IDs now that if I ever wash up on a beach, there's not going to be any doubt who you found. There's like 9 different IDs I have.
Well, legally, it's not clear which, if any of them, make you a legal American citizen at this point. So you're going to have to keep them all.
I'm on thin ice as it is. One more word, they say. One more word out of you, buddy, and you're on the next boat to El Salvador.
What does your birth certificate say? Nothing.
Well, it says things. My birth certificate has words on it. What do you mean it doesn't say nothing?
I just mean you're going to have a combination of that and your passport and
I see.
All these things.
Yeah. Well, you and I, our faces are our passports. You and me.
No,
face is my passport.
No, you were right. My voice. My name's Werner Brandis. My voice is my passport. Do you think they would just let you on a plane because you look like John Roderick, the indie rocker?
It depends on who's working the gate. I've definitely gotten on a plane where the flight attendant was like, "Oh my God,
wow,
it's you," and I know you've done it because every flight attendant loves you.
I've never done it instead of showing ID, though. I'm never like, listen, buddy, just Wikipedia me. I'm going to get in the line.
No, that's true.
That doesn't usually work.
They make you hold up a card.
Yeah. Even at Costco, you can't just be like, hey.
Except now here at the Sony lot, I just walk in and nod at the guy, and he's like, there he is. Counselor.
Did you have to give him your name?
Not today.
Oh, he remembered you.
He was like, it's Mr. Man. And then he said, you know where you're going. I was like, I sure do. Even if I didn't, I do.
That means he either remembers you from yesterday or you look slightly like some other guy.
I don't look, well, other guys look like me, for sure.
That's what I meant, sorry.
But no, it's not like I created a stir yesterday, but I'm sure word got back to him.
You did create a stir.
It's a small stir.
Do you want to? John came to the Jeopardy taping yesterday, and unlike most people who just get out in the parking garage and wait for an assistant to bring them over to the stage, John thought, I'm John Roderick. I go where I please. Who could stop me, a middle-aged white male?
You make it sound like I'm some kind of cartoon bull from the 1940s.
No one can stop me. He's an agent of chaos. He just starts wandering around. He wanders somehow gets onto the soundstage, despite it being like all the doors locked and all the little red alarm lights on.
Yeah.
Like
somebody had propped
like
up
we're making an MGM musical. And eventually some security guy's like, who are you and how did you get here? Because you're just sitting there stuffing your face with Trader Joe's peanut butter pretzels or something. I don't even know you're there. You're like, well, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Well, you went to the booth first.
Yeah, I went to the booth.
Hey, guys, what's going on? We're making a TV show? What's up?
They were all really glad to see me.
Jeopardy legend
friend.
John Roderick.
Hey, pal.
Everyone was happy to see you until the security guy was like, who are you?
Head of security, in fact. And he liked me, too. We had a fine talk. He was just very exasperated that
he's a lovely guy.
There had been several breaches of security protocol for me to have made it all the way
that brought him to you.
At that point, I could have assassinated you with a rubber band.
Me and the person who were supposed to pick you up, meanwhile, are like wandering around the outside of the soundstage being like, where is John?
Yeah, it's funny because I am as God made me. You know, all I'm doing are the things that naturally occur to me to do. But then I find myself in these situations where it's like, I couldn't be more of a cliche of myself right now than if I worked at this all the time. Like I'm actually, when this story eventually gets told, as it now has it's only been a day.
You can reuse it on one of your shows.
But yeah, it's just like, why am I such a cartoon? At every stage I go, what should I do next? Well, I should clearly follow this leaf that's blowing down the sidewalk, and I'll just follow that leaf to this leaf, and look, here's a door. This door isn't locked. You're
like Inspector Clouseau or, kind of. Monsieur Hulot. You're just kind of, your hands behind your back, just kind of wandering through life. Oh, hey, look, a television studio.
Maybe Mr. Magoo is closer.
Right. Were you walking on like a girder, but then they lifted the girder into the air? And
I'll never know.
You had to walk onto another girder?
I'll never know. I mean, I was talking to Mindy about it afterwards, and she was like, yeah, meanwhile, I was waiting at the door where the sign said wait here and waited there patiently, and somehow you're already like in the scaffolding.
I was like, yeah, I'll take you over later. You can see the Ghostbusters hearse, and you were like, yeah, I've already been over there. Sorry, you were trying to talk about gorillas. Speaking of 800-pound organisms that just go wherever they want.
Yeah, speaking of not taking my medication. In our lives, gorillas are they play an outsized role.
Yeah, 800-pound role.
We talk about gorillas a lot.
Outsized compared to what? The number of gorillas we interact with?
Well,
the number that live in our zip code?
Do you think more about gorillas or meerkats?
Like gorillas are very, very like big signifiers.
They are.
I guess why? Donkey Kong and King Kong? The various Kongs?
Right, Kongs, but also 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah.
But also closest to men outside of what, chimpanzees or maybe slightly.
That's why my kid loves the zoo and will not go to the gorilla enclosure.
Because of the fact that they're just human beings trapped in a cage.
I feel like, don't you have a story about the gorilla? Oh, yeah, you had a silverback who was like, ar, 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 ar,
yeah,
ar, ar,
silverback didn't like me at all.
That's right.
Or really liked me. But I think...
Unclear which.
I think it's the other one. I think it's the didn't like me.
Was it just like the Sony experience? You just kind of wandered into the enclosure?
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on? You guys What are you guys doing? Hunting and foraging? Picking fleas out of each other's fur?
I wandered into the room, and the room was full of moms and kids all looking at the gorilla. And then I walked in and was
Changed the vibe.
immediately the next closest thing to a gorilla, and the big boy gorilla that was in the enclosure, the silverback, who was kind of at the back of the exhibit, just immediately was like, "No, not you," and just stormed me.
But this happens every time you walk into a room full of moms. Some kind of chaos. Some kind of chaos ensues.
That's true. And even here, there's always some television producer that's like, "How did you get in here?"
Bunch of moms just living their lives, and suddenly in walks John Roderick.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Well, I feel like gorillas, kind of like everything we talk about on the omnibus. There's the sense that, like, well, gorillas are as old as time, and there's no way gorillas aren't going to be part of the story going forward.
Yeah, you're saying gorillas could be discovered in the same way that, like, New Zealand could be discovered.
Right.
There's already people there, probably.
Right.
But nobody's written about them.
When we say discovered, of course, we're not referring to the people that were living right around gorillas, the people that knew about gorillas the whole time.
People have always known about gorillas?
There were some people, a relatively small number of people, really. And if you consider that some of those people are pygmy, literally a small
number of small people.
Knew about gorillas the whole time. But gorillas were not widely known or widely attested to until surprisingly recently. There are references to what are assumed to be gorillas in the ancient record.
Like Pliny the Elder is like, and in this part of Africa...
Not really even that. There was a Carthaginian named Hanno the Navigator.
Hanno.
And if you're gonna have a name like the Navigator is pretty bad. Pretty badass. Like Hanno the Navigator.
Like on a road trip, he's like, no. I'm shotgun. I'm Hanno the Navigator.
Yeah.
Give Hanno the Navigator the road atlas.
If you were gonna have an appellation like that, which would you choose for yourself? Ken the
Conquistador.
The Conquistador.
Probably not. That's good alliteration.
It's not your way.
It's not very politically correct either.
Ken the Mediator.
The Mediator?
You're not a good mediator, though.
Ken the Merciful.
Ken the Merciful.
Many tales are told.
No, I like that a lot.
Many tales are told of difficult cases that are brought before my throne, and my judgments are always merciful.
Am I not merciful? I can see the calling you Ken the Merciful has that overtone of like he's not actually.
Oh, you have to flatter the leader.
I feel it's a little bit like Ken.
But so often merciful. You see these historical kings, and the epithets are not flattering at all.
Yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, this was Rupert the Bald, and then he was succeeded by Igor the Fat, and you're like, did these guys get to choose their own superlatives? Because did the senior class vote? Like, these suck.
I really hope that I get to choose my own superlative because I'm terrified of what the options, what the short list of them are.
John me off his meds.
But Hanno the Navigator did sail down the west coast of Africa in 500 BC.
Wow.
And did come back with a report that there were, in his description, and this is, something may have been lost in translation.
You don't speak Carthaginian.
I don't. But in his description, there were a race of savage, hairy women who lived in the area that's now Sierra Leone. And the record is that he actually brought back pelts of these women. And they were held in Carthage until the Punic Wars destroyed them. They were destroyed in a fire. But Hanno did not say that it was a different monster kind of race.
Well, I have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead. You there?
Okay.
Yes.
You in the front row with your hand up. So he thinks they're women?
largely women, according to Hanno's description.
Okay, so he's from North Africa. He's a navigator. He's been around. Maybe he hasn't seen other apes, but he must have seen other primates, right?
So there were primates.
There are monkeys in North Africa.
Monkeys. There were no chimps. There were no great apes, but there were
like the Barbary apes are not apes, but they're like macaques or something.
Yeah, macaques. There were baboons.
If you saw a gorilla with little previous knowledge, you would not think that is a very hairy lady.
Nope.
Wouldn't you think this is like those monkeys I saw that one time in Morocco, but bigger?
Correct.
But he did not say.
He didn't. And I think that, a gorilla is the size of a human, whereas a Barbary ape is not. A monkey is not.
Right.
And so I think the looking a gorilla in the eye, you could be, and then, and there's a hairlessness to gorilla that, they're not like completely covered with hair.
Is that why he thinks they're women? Can he see like on their fronts that they are unhaired where they have like mammary glands?
The problem is that he didn't write an extensive report.
Hanno. He's not Hanno the stenographer.
Right. And whatever the pelts were, they were destroyed by Romans who were burning Carthage, and typical.
They got theirs.
Think about what else they burned. Must have been fine for them.
The Vandals got the last laugh.
Yeah. The Vandals took the handles, and they're salting the earth. That was perfectly good earth before. So the word gorilla, means ultimately hairy.
Does it mean hairy woman?
Hairy woman.
Is that why it's like ends with an A? It's a feminine ending?
Yeah.
And that dates back to
Hanno the navigator in 500 BC. And then there is no one else. There's no further report of the gorilla.
Is it possible that he did not even, apparently the etymology assumes that the thing he saw are our modern African gorillas. But if he's just on the coast of Sierra Leone, could there be gorillas just that he sees from his boat or during a brief shore expedition? Because you could go up and down Africa and give no thought to the gorillas. You could miss them entirely.
People have been doing it for 2,000 years.
The Vikings were never like, hey.
People continued to go up and down the west coast of Africa, and no one else had a story of gorilla for 2,000 years.
Because the gorillas today are pretty far from Sierra Leone.
They're not splashing in the ocean waves, no. Right. And so this is what's very confusing about it. It is where his report is where we get the word gorilla, but I think it's just as likely that he met like a family of hairy ladies.
Like he just saw some tribe and he had never seen people of that coloration?
He does talk about them being...
It's a little dark that he brings back their pelts, I guess, if he actually did just meet some locals.
Yeah, see, he says that there was an island of hairy women, basically, and that they...
Hold on, now it's an island?
Well, yeah, so there are a lot...
This guy's a navigator.
Hanno's accounts of his journeys, there are a lot of people that are... contemporary critics and now our own era, people are like, I'm not so sure that Hanno did everything that he said, but it is clear that, most people agree he made it to Senegal. He had been around. He did his work. Pliny the Elder does talk about the gorilla.
But his work is full of just kind of crazy mythological stuff like, and there's also a part of Ethiopia where they have their faces in their stomachs, like it's hard to tell from Pliny, like what's fourth hand and what's just mythology.
And this is some of the source material for that.
Yeah.
Hanno's work. But he says that his men tried to capture some of these gorilla, and they were so ferocious that they couldn't capture them alive, and they killed 3 of the women, and the skins were kept in the temple of Juno.
To me, that's This is just me learning about this for the first time, but I have some opinions, John.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that if they're noteworthy enough that you're keeping the skins, that would not just happen if you're a North African navigator and you kill some other Africans in your travels. You know, like
right, exactly.
That wouldn't be that notable.
And I think the word,
but if it was some new species, that's when you'd be like, hey, we've never seen these.
the word gorilla actually came from his African translators, and it got a little bit of a Greek ending.
See, this guy has black friends.
Yeah, he does.
Is what I'm saying.
He's
like
he knows a lot of black people.
Yeah,
he knows these aren't those.
Some of his best navigational friends are black people. He's not just going to be fooled by some village in Sierra Leone and think, well, this must be a new species.
And what's crazy is that this information coming back to Carthage, being in, do you say Pliny or Pliny or Pliny?
I think it's Pliny with a short I.
Let's say Pliny. It did not really set fire to any Mediterranean explorers in terms of hey, let's go back down to Western Africa and see if we can find any of these amazing creatures, because the gorilla remained a mythological, a there be monsters level of mystery beast.
Because the world is full of them at that time.
Yeah.
People probably literally thought there were dragons and griffins.
Probably nothing. They thought there were. Yeah. It wasn't until 1625.
So we just jumped, 2,000 years?
2,000 years. That an English sailor who'd been captured by the Portuguese, he was on a mission actually in South America and was captured by some Brazilian tribes who traded him to the Portuguese. The Portuguese then took him back across the Atlantic to Angola. And he was one of these sort of captives that eventually became kind of useful to them and ends up writing a story about his time in Portuguese enslavement.
We don't hear about the 100 others that didn't make it.
Yeah.
This is some survivor's fallacy.
But Andrew Battelle wrote about a mysterious creature that he called the Pongo. And the Pongo were very much described as these sort of monstrous, super strong, impossible to fight creatures that killed Africans in the dozens.
But no other description? Because so far that could be like a hippo or a tsetse fly.
So yeah, Andrew Battelle does tell the story of the Pongo. He describes the Pongo thus. This Pongo, I would actually like to be known as John the Pongo.
John the Pongo. Isn't that the name of one of the 101 Dalmatians?
Oh.
There you go.
This Pongo is in all proportion like a man, but he is more like a giant in stature than a man, for he is very tall and hath a man's face.
This is gorilla-like.
Hollow-eyed, with long hair upon his brows. His face and ears are without hair, and his hands also. His body is full of hair, but not very thick, and it is a dunnish color. He's really describing a gorilla.
Yeah, this is no longer a hippo, I think.
He goeth always upon his legs, and carrieth his hands clasped on the nape of his neck.
No, I don't know if I'm with him.
He's talking about a thoughtful gorilla who's not in the midst of killing Portuguese. When he goeth upon the ground, they go many together and kill many Negroes that travel in the woods. Those Pongos are never taken alive because they are so strong that 10 men cannot hold one of them.
The funny thing is, if you heard this story about the Himalayas, you'd be like, oh, what a funny mythological creature this is. But this one's real.
Well, and that is how his story was treated. Most of the folks who read this account thought of it as a chimera. They were like, lol, sure, guy.
I guess all the 20th century stuff about the wise, peaceful gorilla has made me forget the reputation they would have as just violent brutes. That the first people to contact gorillas all they would know is about all the humans they'd killed.
Well, it's really interesting, this point of our story, because from 1625, when Andrew Battelle relates the Pongo, again, 200 years goes by, and this is the 200 years, I think, that we crucially remember West Africa being systematically plundered by European explorers, slavers, Belgians, other unsavories.
The three kinds of menaces?
Portuguese,
explorers, slavers, and Belgians.
Belgians.
Oh, look out.
And yet, throughout that whole period, transatlantic slave trade, like the exploration of, the exploration of the Congo didn't happen until the middle of the 19th century.
There could be Pongo in the Congo.
There were. No further European references to gorillas.
I wonder if that means there really wasn't that much contact between gorillas and Africans, or if there just wasn't enough curious naturalists asking the Africans about the gorillas.
This was an era where curious naturalists were pretty thick on the ground. If you think about British, French, and German, like aristocratic scientists.
There's so many stories about, just rhinos and wildebeests being taken back to Europe and shown in a crystal palace somewhere.
It's very, very interesting that whatever the encounters that were happening between European like explorers and slavers and colonial like intrusion into Africa, this was also the period of African colonialism in major part.
Right.
The number of people that were coming out of the jungle and saying like, oh yeah, we have gorillas all around us all the time. Anybody got any questions? And the people that had questions, there was no exchange. And you would think of all the things that might have been worth money, of all the things that might have been worth status, even to bring like a fingernail of a gorilla would have been,
or a sketch or a sighting.
and yet the record is silent.
Is this just some Eurocentrism where, if these guys had been able to shoot something, they would have brought it back mounted, but like no one's going to actually bother to ask anybody, hey, what are your coolest animals?
No, because the Europeans are everywhere in the world shooting things right and left at this time.
Right, but are they not asking?
Oh, and they're asking. They're not just asking, they're demanding. Everywhere they go, shaking the tree. What's the craziest thing you've got to shoot? They say.
But no one is telling them about the Pongo.
And it is, I think, partly that the gorilla lived in like dense environments.
The highlands of Rwanda, where
either up in the mountains, the mountain gorillas, or down in the lowlands, the lowland gorillas.
Oh, is that how that works?
And in the eastern lowlands, the eastern lowland gorillas, and in the western lowlands, the western lowland gorillas.
This is all coming together for me.
These weren't areas. Gorillas weren't living on savanna. They weren't living in areas where, and this is the thing.
I just wonder how much, like, your average, African that lives within 50 miles of a gorilla population, they must know. I don't know.
One wonders, because
the word is not getting out from the village to Colonel whoever with his elephant gun.
And then, this is the thing. Gorillas are such a feature of how we think of Africa, we think of large mammals.
Today, they're a mainstay of African tourism. There are countries that only get Western visitors because they have gorillas to show off.
Yeah, and like I say, gorillas are. I bet you, if we walked out of this room and walked around this building, we would find a picture of a gorilla without looking too hard, because we're in a building full of cubicles, and there are young people that put pictures up in their cubicles, and I bet you there's a gorilla.
My aunt's room, when I was a kid, one of the first memories I have of visiting my aunt is she had a big King Kong poster.
Yeah.
King Kong climbing the Empire State Building. They loom very large in our culture.
Well, in 1840, no one had ever heard of it. except for
Andrew.
except for a pongo. And what's very interesting at this point is that almost the entirety of the rest of the story involves Americans.
See, when you want the job done right,
That's right.
get rid of the Belgians. Don't send the Carthaginians.
In the 1840s, a missionary by the name of Thomas Stoughton Savage.
Is he American,
He
despite
is
the
American.
accent?
Well, that's my mid-Atlantic 1840s mid-Atlantic accent.
Got it.
He goes on a mission to Liberia. Now, Liberia, of course, in the early 1800s, was in all the news because in 1822, Liberia was founded as a colony, an American colony of freed slaves who were going back to Africa.
Yes.
A real switcheroo.
And as a result, like one of the one or two only like non-colonized nations in Africa at the time.
Right. Although colonized.
Yeah, but
Reverse colonized.
Soon thereafter independent, actually, at a
Right.
time when other powers had not given their African territories back.
But I mean colonized by American blacks.
Yes.
Yes. So in 1840s, Thomas Savage goes with a naturalist named Jeffries Wyman.
His first name is Jeffries?
Yeah, Jeffries Wyman.
So that's too many Jeffries.
I like the name though. Jeffries Wyman. It's like, who's Wyman?
Now we know. It's Jeffries.
They were
I wish that I had Jeffries' girl. No?
It's all right. I mean, if I had a bell, but I don't.
You'd bell in the morning?
They brought back, because Liberia is not rife with great apes.
It's too far north, right?
Yeah.
I was looking at modern, there are apes on the African coast. I was looking at the map, but it's not that much far north of Cameroon. Like, at least today, not up to Liberia.
And I don't think they were in Liberia even then. But as part of their kind of African adventure, Thomas Savage and Jeffries Wyman came in contact with the skull and bones, but not the one you're thinking of. Skull and bones of a gorilla.
Oh, so they don't see a live one, but
No.
they see a skeleton of an animal they did not think existed.
And they were both educated Victorians enough to recognize, like, this is new to science. And they brought it back to the Society of Natural History in Boston.
Do you think anybody thought it was like an extinct creature? Because,
I think the way they acquired it was gave them the
With a story.
understanding, like, this is, because they described it, they named the species Troglodytes gorilla. Gorilla, a reference to Hanno.
Hanno's work.
Or Pliny, and troglodyte, of course, being the word for caveman.
Like a caveman. Yeah.
So they seem to know what they had, and this was, I guess, the 1850s, the era where Central Africa was one of the last truly unexplored places for European explorers in an era when exploration and science were just all the rage. If you were a young boy of means, to put your butterfly net onto the back of your, of your camel and head
Steamer
off.
trunk. I guess well into the 20th century, the adventurous cliche was, the dark continent, darkest Africa.
That's right.
And there's probably some racialist overlay there for sure, but what they really meant was like the last mysterious place. Who knows what's going on in there? The light of the West has yet to set foot.
And I think the first time you walk into a Congolese jungle, the sense of it being dark is pretty profound. I think that it's dense.
Yeah.
And that's partly why, and this is kind of the Bigfoot problem too. The forests of the Northwest where Bigfoot
certainly does live.
It certainly does live. It's the density of the undergrowth that makes it plausible that a thing like that big could live kind of just When we were kids, I remember driving through Montlake Terrace and looking out the window at night and going like, these trees should be full of Bigfoots. There's Bigfoots everywhere.
Linwood had very few Bigfoot in the 70s, I bet.
As far as you know.
I never saw one.
But I think this is part of gorilla are shy. And if you were in a white pith helmet tromping through the jungle, a gorilla may not have any reason to step forward into the clearing and say, ahoy.
They probably weren't quiet, these expeditions.
No.
They weren't like...
Almost certainly not.
They weren't like bird watchers, like maybe we'll stumble upon something.
But now we introduce into the story a man of sort of ambiguous origins.
Ooh.
By the name of Paul Duchaillu.
Is he French or are your lips just numb?
Duchaillu. Both. He's maybe French.
Oh, yeah, you did say ambiguous origins.
When he died, it was unclear whether he might have been born in New Orleans. He might have been born in French Caribbean.
Mm.
He might have been born in Paris. What's clear is that his father was a French adventurer, but merchant adventurer.
You can't test for that when somebody dies? You can't, test their Frenchness?
Well...
see how much of them is butterfat?
I think the issue in his time, in the mid 18th century, 19th century,
in
his mid 19th century time in the Americas, the fact is that his mother was probably Caribbean.
So he's mixed race, he's Creole?
He's mixed race, or they would have said quadroon. And he was, but he was a Frenchman and a scientist and an erudite person, and so he concealed his origins in order not to be discredited in his sort of sciencing. But he was very much an American in that he lived his life in America and acted on behalf of American science. But he had all the entree and all the exotic...
international cachet of his accent.
And he is the first European to see a live gorilla.
Oh.
In 1857.
That's how long it takes. It's literally now been, 2,400 years or something since Hanno?
And finally, we have a European person who says, I have seen one in person. And they are big, hairy men. And they are hard to capture. And he was unable to...
That just sounds like he's giving excuses.
Well...
Hey, why didn't you bring back one of these amazing things? Well, the main thing you have to know about these guys, so hard to capture. Nobody could have done it, certainly. It certainly wasn't my failing.
He did bring a dead one to the UK in 1861.
That he had made dead,
presumably? And say, here's the one. Now stop laughing. Now who's laughing? I didn't just sew this together out of wombats. This is a real thing.
It must have been a hit. Imagining not thinking that there's any Yeti-like beasts in the world, and then here's a real one. It's the half human quality of a gorilla must have been just overwhelming to these people who didn't know that great apes existed.
Right? Imagine. And it sets off, it is a spectacular find. Paul Duchaillu kind of has an illustrious career. He is the person in 1865 that actually confirms the existence of pygmies. So he's bringing back all of the stuff that filled our Time Life books, like Amazing World stuff in the 1970s. He's introducing the Western world to all of this stuff.
I just realized today that I don't know anything about pygmies. That's a real thing, but it's just some local tribe that tends to be smaller than the tribes around them, I guess.
I do feel like if we're going to do a pygmies episode, I'd better take 20 minutes and learn more so that I'm not shooting from the hip. But they are a tribe of.
It's probably not the kind of topic where you want to just shoot from the hip. I have some guesses about these African people.
I mean, you and I have both read the Time Life books about pygmies, but unfortunately, they were written in a time when they probably don't stand up to close scrutiny.
I'm sure the stuff we read was super racist, so who knows what was true.
And this was an era probably when European reports of African tribes in the jungles of West Africa would have been describing them all as cannibals.
Right.
But what this set off was now a real European and American guerrilla, maybe not fever, but a lot of interest in guerrilla. And the people that were able to get down to guerrilla habitat and get in there and try to capture gorilla found that gorilla are extremely hard to capture. And the way that European zoos ended up with gorillas was often that the gorilla catcher would go and just kill the mom.
Oh.
And then grab the baby.
Because they can't protest.
But no one knew how to keep a gorilla alive. And so there were gorillas transported back to Europe and to America to be displayed in zoos. This was kind of early on in the zoological movement, as we've described in the omnibus before. But they were treated like like murderous monsters. And so no gorilla really could survive in captivity for more than a year. There was a famous gorilla in 1876 called Mapungu, who was captured for the Berlin Zoo and I guess was in Berlin and Munich for about a year and died. And so people wanted to see gorilla, and there just weren't there weren't enough gorilla to see for all the demand to see gorilla that there was. Even a big city zoological garden might not have a gorilla. None of them really could keep a gorilla alive. And that is where the story introduces Carl Akeley, the father of modern taxidermy.
Oh.
Carl Akeley was the man who mounted P.T. Barnum's Jumbo after Jumbo died.
I see. Mounted him on a skeleton. He didn't just climb on top of the body.
Jump up on him.
Okay.
But he is the taxidermist who basically invented the idea of building an armature
and then putting
the skin on it.
What did people do before?
Well, they did really terrible jobs of stuffing dead animals that then the skin and everything rotted, and they basically looked like... You've seen bad taxidermy. I don't have to tell you.
I'm sure there's a bad taxidermy Instagram that I'm
1,000
following right now.
of them.
But here you're basically building a replica of the animal and then putting the skin over the top.
And building... He was... Ackley was a naturalist, and of that school, of that Teddy Roosevelt era, where the best way to get people to believe in conservation is to kill the elephants, and
because then you can show them a dead elephant.
Yeah, show them a dead elephant, and it'll interest young boys in Africa. And he did. I mean, modern taxidermy is an art form. All you have to do is see 5 bad taxidermied cats and 1 good, and you realize, like, oh, a lot of work went into making that cat look like a cat. Because if you just skin a cat, or don't skin it, stuff a cat, it's not going to look anything like a cat.
And the good taxidermy dioramas you see in natural history museums today, today we think, oh, that's a little quaint. But at the time when you couldn't watch a David Attenborough documentary, like seeing a taxidermied cheetah jumping on a taxidermied antelope, like that was as good as it got.
Yeah.
That's a 4K HD trip to the wild. So, there just weren't a lot of options.
And Carl actually went on a trip to Africa with Teddy Roosevelt. He's one of these old school guys who got jumped by an 80-pound leopard and fought it and killed it.
Wow.
And then stuffed it. Where you're like, okay, that's a lost art. There's no Instagram of people doing that. That
should be the rule. You should only be allowed to taxidermy an animal that has tried to kill you. Because then it's self-defense. Your Honor, he tried to taxidermy me. No?
In Africa, leopard taxidermies you.
Leopard stuff you.
Anyway, so Carl goes, in 1921, he goes to the Virunga Mountains in the Belgian Congo with the idea of collecting gorillas to taxidermy and bring back to populate natural history museums. And his experience, and he, I think did hunt some gorilla in order to have specimens to taxidermy. But in the process of doing it, had encounters with gorilla that moved him.
He's the first person to think, these are not brutish, scary giants.
Yes. And he then became a gorilla conservationist in the 1920s. And it was he that convinced King Albert of Belgium, not normally the hero of any Africa story. The King of Belgium never ends up being the hero of most of these stories.
I mean, at the time, maybe he thought so. It hasn't aged well.
But he convinced Albert of Belgium to declare the Virunga National Park, which was at the time Albert Park, the first national park in Africa in 1925.
As a gorilla preserve.
And then they expanded the gorilla preserve over time.
I looked up when the mountain gorilla was first discovered, because, that's the subspecies that lives there. And I guess that was not even known until, I want to say, like 1902.
Yeah.
So,
And that was a German. I think a German was on vacation and up in the mountains and was like, these are, look at these.
I learned that a few years ago. I was asked to write something write a puzzle for this thing set in 1897. And they were like, do a trivia quiz, but trivia as it would have been in 1897. Uh-huh. And so when I learned this about the mountain gorilla, I was like, oh, this will be the thing. Which of these animals does not really exist?
That's pretty good.
And because that was the most exciting thing I learned, that nobody in 1900 knew that mountain gorillas were real.
And mountain gorilla, of the three subspecies of gorilla, mountain gorilla are the rarest and the most endangered. There's only 1,000 of them, I think.
Oh, wow.
Whereas the eastern lowland gorilla, western gorilla, so many of them. I'm eating gorilla burgers right and left.
You can't shake a stick.
So this is kind of a big moment in the transition between thinking of gorillas as monsters that live in caves and are what make traveling in Africa taking your life into your own hands, to imagining gorilla as part of the human family. And a lot of the gorilla talk in the mid-19th century is very much connected to the talk around evolution, cultural anthropology.
Did the discovery of gorillas move the needle on acceptance of evolutionary biology? Because how could it not, right?
Well, because there were, a lot of the argument around Darwin was not against evolution exactly, but it was very much an enlightened argument about it not being natural selection, about it being divine selection.
I see. So we're okay with saying that
things have changed, things evolve, but they do so with the guided hand of a benevolent architect.
God turned a gorilla into Adam and Eve at some point.
Yeah. And so it was very hard for a scientist of the mid-19th century to not see the overwhelming the evidence seeming to indicate that even before there being any kind of cellular analysis, these
hath not a gorilla eyes, hath not a gorilla hands.
Right. But the idea that a gorilla would have compassion, or that we would have compassion for them, that they would have the capacity for empathy. One of the big fans of Du Chaillu's book that he wrote in 1899, Explorations and Adventures in Equatorial Africa, was a young man by the name of Marion Cooper.
Oh,
who read the book in 1899.
I know where this is going.
And was so struck by the story that it planted the idea of an
adventure story.
About
a giant gorilla.
About a giant gorilla. And, all the invention that went on in creating King Kong. Mm-hmm. As the story evolved in Cooper's mind, the idea that the ape would be sympathetic and that the movie would end with compassion for Kong was something that evolved over this same time.
Yeah, I guess you always think about King Kong swatting at the biplanes, and you forget that the core of the movie is like, oh, this is not just it's not Godzilla,
Right.
It's not an unfeeling monster with radiation breath. This poor guy maybe should not have been brought to New York City in the first place.
Yeah, he's trying to save the girl.
He loves the girl.
He loves the girl.
What could be more relatable? Who among us, John, doesn't love a girl?
Well, by the 1930s, zoos have figured out how to keep gorillas alive.
Really, the zoo's a lot better when the gorillas are alive. Isn't that what you want in a zoo?
There are very popular gorillas in San Diego, in the Washington National Zoo, in Bristol. There's a gorilla named Alfred, who is like the star of Bristol. Alfred's one of these like gorilla babies that Alfred's mother was killed. Alfred was sold in some animal market in Kinshasa, and then some trader had him as his pet, and then he got sold to a sailor on the docks in Hamburg.
He's been a mascot for his whole life.
Yeah, and everybody that meets this gorilla, Alfred, is like, this guy's got riz. Alfred's funny, and he's a nut, and he loves people. He loves attention. I mean, he's been with humans his whole life.
That's what you need. You need a spokes gorilla.
And Alfred goes...
We kept bringing back these gorillas that were a drag.
Yeah, all these mean gorillas or sad gorillas. Alfred's a fun gorilla, and he ends up being the star attraction in Bristol. And then, of course, during that period, everybody coming through Bristol and in the period around the war, like he's a gorilla ambassador. And people are beginning to understand that gorilla can be, they can be your fun friend too. But there are still so few of them really for anybody. Nobody has, like the first gorilla born in captivity was not born until 1956.
That's crazy.
And that was in Columbus, Ohio.
Of course. They're such a powerful symbol of conservation. Just the obvious, empathy that a human observer will have for a gorilla. It's an easier sell than, we're running out of these passenger pigeons.
Well, and all of that is really connected through all of this story to a man named George Schaller, who in 1959, at the age of 26, went to study the mountain gorilla in its native habitat and wrote in the 60s a book called Year of the Gorilla. And he was the one that popularized the idea, and this is post-war boomer child, National Geographic era, really we were reading these very accounts when you and I were sitting on the floor in the back of the library, and the teacher was like, "Where's Ken?"
And not realizing these were the first such accounts.
The very first.
Yeah.
These books were 10 years old when we were in grade school. And he was the one that said, listen, these are not violent brutes. They're compassionate and capable of love and our closest relatives. And this is the era when most gorillas were living in concrete zoo enclosures that had no natural features. People were pounding on the glass, still being treated like a captive monster.
Unhappy gorillas. Even Alfred, possibly.
Yeah. Now, the thing about George Schaller, he's still alive.
Oh.
He is also a Bigfoot truther. So hopefully that doesn't change your feelings
Our
about
two
him.
closest relatives, the mountain gorilla and the Bigfoot.
And then Schaller influenced an anthropologist named Louis Leakey, who very much now is trying to tell the story of primates and humans as part of a continuum, an evolutionary continuum. It's the kind of cultural anthropology coming full circle, but Leakey was a real Johnny Appleseed of science. And Leakey was a great influence on three women that became what he called the trimates.
Oh, that's funny. I guess I know two of them.
And it's Jane Goodall,
right,
who became the ultimate evangelist of chimps.
Kind of, to this day, the animal kingdom's ambassador to humanity. I wonder how old Jane Goodall is. Is she in her 90s?
She was
91.
All three of these women were young women at the time. And Leakey was kind of the person and none of them came out of, they went into science partly inspired by their love of this connection with primates.
I always think of Leakey as an anthropologist. I had no idea he had obviously you could see the connection between primates, but I had no idea he had this connection to the zoological world.
Yeah. And then Diane Fossey,
who gave her life for the gorillas.
And she was the gorilla whisperer.
Right, because Jane Goodall's more of a chimp fan.
Right. And then Birute Galdikas. Let me say that again. Birute Galdikas, who is a American, but I think from Lithuania. And she was an orangutan.
I like how there's
specialist.
I like how there's a third, like, you know how the three tenors has the third guy nobody's heard of or whatever. There's a Peggy Schuyler of primatology also.
Birute is still alive. She was, I think, maybe the youngest of them. She's 78 now, and she's from Canada, which is maybe why you don't know her or don't identify her as strongly as you do the other two.
I bet the Canadians are like, whatever. She's the most famous of them.
Yeah, right. Well, she's for sure probably the most famous Lithuanian Canadian anthropologist and primatologist.
She's gonna win the tontine if she's that much younger than Jane Goodall. And I like how they each have a species. There's a gorilla one, a chimp one, and a orangutan one.
And really fascinating the role that Leakey played in just sort of saying, like, I mean, God, please knock on wood, there's no dark side to that story. But it seems like he really did encourage these three young women to pursue sort of an anthropological approach to primatology.
I think how many people went into primatology, how many women went into biological sciences because of, like, these celebrity women scientists.
All of them.
Like, a generation of zoo workers are probably like, if not for Jane Goodall.
And everybody since George Schaller, I mean, George Schaller influenced everyone who followed. But really, these three women are the ones that have made the primates, have really integrated them into our idea of the human family. Astonishing to me to think that as late as our own lives, most of this information was yet to, I mean, no one had even spent that much time just watching them eat.
Yeah.
You know, they were still absolutely mysterious.
Kind of bittersweet, though, to think about how, maybe they were the last great discovery, right? Like, maybe other species were never observed and are now lost.
We'll never know what the passenger pigeons were thinking.
Right. There's probably species we haven't even named that were somewhere in an Indonesian jungle and lived and died unobserved. But hopefully it's not too late for the gorilla.
Well, one of the funny things about Paul du Chaillu is that he had another act after discovering the gorilla.
After
for all
gorilla
intents and
fever.
purposes. He then went and read and translated all of the Viking sagas, and he's the person that first advanced the theory that the Vikings had influence on the culture of the UK.
Really?
And at the time, he was mocked, just laughed out of the room.
Think how many British museums are now built on this principle.
Yeah, he was the one basically who discovered not only the gorilla, but the Viking.
Could you imagine that on your resume? Like, as far as changing 20th century adventure fiction.
Yeah.
Vikings and gorillas.
Because prior to his interest, Viking sagas were just something that, that Danish moms told their kids in hushed whispers.
I remember reading an old Prince Valiant story where he goes to Africa and fights a gorilla. Can you imagine how much Paul would have loved this? A Viking versus a gorilla?
I doubt he lived that long.
The eternal struggle, Viking versus gorilla. And that concludes Gorillas, Discovery of. Entry 540.PS10420, certificate number 46468, in the omnibus. Speaking of 800-pound gorillas you don't want to tangle with, social media was a force for great evil in our era. At Omnibus Project was our account at the time we actually used it. You can find us at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick at various periods in the latter days of social media. Our email address, for people who wanted to send us correspondence, virtual digital correspondence, was theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You could send physical items to us at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. Should I open a few of these things while we have it here?
Let's do. What do you got over there?
This one's interesting to me because it contains American currency. Greg wants us to know that he has just finished the whole Omnibus archive.
Hey, Greg!
He listened to the whole thing. John,
Good man.
You may remember me from several hugs at Long Winters, Game Changers, or defunct podcast shows.
I've almost certainly hugged Greg a lot of times.
Ken, you may remember me from the time I was charging near you in the Target parking lot. Probably.
Maybe.
I guess, which Target? The South Center one? I'm trying to think. Maybe the Alderwood one? He's very sad that he's doesn't have a fire hose of Omnibus anymore, but he's thinking of switching to Joe Rogan, he says. Perhaps I'll have to start listening to Joe Rogan. He says it's confusing now to listen to Omnibus catalog shows because the references are just so weird. Like I'll say something about how I'll never host Jeopardy or,
right.
Like that famous show where we keep saying, there will never be a pandemic and 80s punchline, Donald Trump will never be president.
Right. Or where I'm like, I can do no wrong. No one will ever cancel me or be mad at me.
I'm just a musician. But to celebrate the end of listening to Omnibus and to thank us for years and years of cocktail party and first date anecdotes, he sent us 2 crisp $10 bills.
Whoa, look at those. Well, now, wait a minute. You have 2 $10 bills. You're about to hand me the one that's in your right hand and keep the one that's in your left. But I want you to look at them and make that decision like knowingly based on some detail in those bills. Give me the one that you think belongs to me and the one that belongs to you keep for yourself based on a reason. Have a reason.
The only difference I can see is that the crease in this one goes through Alexander Hamilton's hair and the crease in this one kind of misses his head.
So which is mine?
I'm going to give you the nicer one.
Thank you. You're, Ken the merciless, Ken the selfless.
You just said merciless. I'm the merciful.
Oh yeah, that's
it's Ming the merciless. He's like my bizarro world opposite. Thank you so much, Greg. We also have a gift from Crystal. A namaste gift from Crystal. We can decide which is which. So here's another Alexander Hamilton moment. I feel like these are going to be new agey. What are they? No, maybe not so much. They're decorative bracelets of some kind. And they look very different. Here's kind of a monochromatic white and black zebra-y one.
They're like friendship bracelets.
This one's more multicolored with maybe kind of a southwestern vibe.
Yeah, this one kind of feels like you could wear it to a black tie event, and this one's more like if you're going to get in the water.
Made by Nami.
What does that mean?
This just seems to be the jewelry outfit that made them. Thank you so much, Crystal. Which
Those
one are you
are
going to choose?
Well, I want you to have the one that is more...
Boring?
Well, no. I was going to say this one is less likely to read as hippie, whereas this might read a little bit hippier. But would you like the hippie one?
I kind of like the monochromatic one, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought.
John the Merciful.
Yeah, John the Merciful.
Okay, let's see. Let's split up the next letter here. This is from
I'm
Tyler.
gonna put this on right now. As a matter of fact.
Look at this great wax seal, by the way. Tyler went all out when he got that for Christmas some year. I'm breaking the seal here. The Raven just delivered this to the bunker.
Wait, you're Aemon Targaryen.
It's a card with some kind of a Dalmatians on skateboards theme. Tyler has recently started listening to the show. He's bouncing around.
Welcome.
He enjoyed Goodnight Moon, Emperor Norton. He'd never heard of etchings. Coming up to see someone's etchings. He also liked Present Colon Ensign Cusel, but unfortunately, he started writing about it too close to the end of the line and does not know how the hyphen works.
Plan ahead.
He's suggesting ideas for topics. The Zildjian Symbol Company, am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
All symbols are... Lassen National Park volcanic explosion. Oh, yeah, Lassen erupted in the 20th century.
Yeah, we know that one.
And the Livestrong bracelet. That's a pretty good... These are all pretty good topics. The Livestrong bracelet.
We just have bracelets here from the reader prior.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And I admire your wax seal. Finally, Erica in Cresswell, Oregon, just south of Eugene. I don't know if Erica knows this, but I used to spend all my summers there as a kid. My grandparents lived in Cresswell. On a recent show, we mentioned that I think we both think the periodic table of elements is kind of ill-designed. What would that have been?
I don't know, but I got a lot of people talking to me about the design of the periodic table as though God himself designed it, and I stopped fighting with them after a while. I was
a thing you had no interest in hearing more about, I bet. I just think I know the periodic table is real and truly represents atomic structure and electron shells. I just think it's the wrong way to teach it.
Yeah.
It's not intuitive.
So what does our correspondent have to say?
Erica sent us I don't know how this solves the problem, an Egyptian hieroglyphic version of the periodic table.
Oh, how intuitive.
So this should do it. She wanted to thank you for doing that event with Dan Carlin.
Did she like it?
I guess she didn't go, being
perfect.
from the Willamette Valley, but she did know Dan's work because of his... Did you know he started in Eugene Talk Radio?
Yeah.
I did not.
Yeah.
Ooh, but she has a history with him. When Oregon changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, they were maybe on opposite sides of that divide.
She and he.
And Dan perhaps not on the right side of history.
Oh, wow.
You should have grilled Dan Carlin about his 90s pro-Columbus past. Erica's take, this must have been something we mentioned in the show. Oh, see, she says it's okay to say Eugene.
I do.
Whereas
every opportunity.
I always correct my friend who says, I have a Korean friend who says Eugene.
Yes.
Because that's often how Koreans say it. And, it's a common, Eugene is a common name. And I'm like, no, it's Eugene. She says you can say Eugene as long as you don't say Willamette.
Oh.
Which is the
Who
ultimate.
would say Willamette?
I mean, everybody says Willamette if they're not from around here. All those people who say Spokane probably say Willamette.
Eugene is just what you say if you're trying to drive people from Eugene up the wall. And people from Eugene should be driven up a wall.
They also must hate Oregon.
Well, Oregon is hateful, but Eugene is just fun.
Oregon.
Yeah, well, okay. That sounds like a prospector. And I think I think, the original settlers to Oregon were 40% prospector.
I was at the the TCM old timey movie festival. That's not what they call it, but TCM is showing everybody Katharine Hepburn movies 24/7, John Wayne movies. I went with my brother and sister-in-law. We went to see To Catch a Thief with Cary Grant, and I had forgotten the plot point that he pretends to be a lumber guy from Portland.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think Cary Grant's believable as a Portland timber magnate, but
not in that suit.
But I was waiting for him to say Oregon, and he doesn't. He says Oregon. Cary Grant did it right.
Good man.
So, big ups to Cary Grant for that. That's pretty much it for the mailbag. You can find Futurelings online on Reddit, and there's a Facebook group. Wherever you feel the least ethically challenged online, there's probably Futurelings. I think there's a Discord now. And finally, the only reason Omnibus still exists here in 2025 is because of the generous support of our Patreon listeners, who in exchange for a monthly pittance get all kinds of fabulous perks and prizes that some of you freeloaders are depriving yourselves of. Don't you love joy? Don't you love yourselves? You deserve this. You deserve good things to happen to you in your life. And this is one of the best things you can do for $5 and up a month.
Treat yourselves.
That's
to
right.
Giving us $10 a month.
It's Treat Yourself Day here at Omnibus. And treat us with money.
Treat us well with money, which is how Americans show love.
Greg sent us 2 $10 bills, but that's very labor intensive. I'm glad Greg took the time.
Me too.
But if any of you don't have Greg's abundant spare time to listen to Joe Rogan, which is apparently what he's doing now.
Don't do it.
Don't do it, Greg.
Don't do it.
He's just kidding. You can just do it virtually at patreon.com/omnibusproject.
Future links from our vantage point in your distant past. We have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.